Okay, guys. So for the second half of our English Online webinar, we have Danny and Johan out from Toronto. They're both out east. Talking about tips using technology in a blended and learning environment for pronunciation strategies. I'll hand it over to you, Danny,
Hi,
and thank you guys very much for being here.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Before we start the presentation, I would like everybody to know, oh, there's an echo. Keep cutting it out. Well, I'll try to speak closer to the microphone, and we'll just switch the microphones to me and Danny. Oh. In and out. How about now? Is it better? No, we only have one microphone. So we'll just start now, and if there's problems, then we'll try to figure it out in the middle. So before we start the presentation, on the bottom left corner, there's a hands up bar. So if you click on that, we'll try to answer any questions that you have. And on the right hand side is the chat window. There's also a private chat that you can ask us any questions and ask us anything directly. Okay. The presentation will last about 40 minutes, with 20 minutes reserved for questions. Okay, so let's start the presentation. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Teaching Integrated Pronunciation Strategies Tips in a Blended Learning Environment. My name is Jonathan Woodworth, and I've been teaching ESL for over 10 years. And before that, I was a software engineer, so I'm used to all these technical problems. And because I used to be a software engineer, and I've been an ESL teacher for the past 10 years, I integrate technology into classroom is my passion. Currently, I work at York University, and I'm also the academic coordinator for York English Language Test, and I've been a consultant for assessing speaking and pronunciation for the past 7 years. Now, here's Danny with the overview.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Danny, and I've been teaching ESL EAP for the past decade or so. I started as an FSL teacher, French as a second language, and then I switched over to English when I moved to Korea 8 years ago. And I started focusing on pronunciation. So, moving myself around. Is that better? No, that's not better. Now, I started teaching pronunciation about 8 years ago when I started teaching at universities in Korea, and currently I teach pronunciation both at York University and also at Ryerson University. So today we're going to begin with an overview of what this is all about, discussing the strategy and the description, and then we'll talk about why we've incorporated pronunciation into a blended learning environment, followed by 3 examples of the 3 types of activities that we use in our classes: alpha manipulation, voiceovers, and learner creations. And then at the end, we'll come question and questions about this topic, and we'll final.
Hi, Danny. We're having a difficulty hearing you. If there's any way you can move closer to the microphone, because we can hear you, but it's just you sound very far away.
Let's get better. Hello? Everyone hear me as we discuss the overview of technology? So before we begin the actual overview, I'll be defining a few terms that I'll be discussing. we start off with what a segmental is, which is the smallest unit of sound. For example, when we are what the P sound or the F sound or the B sound or the B sound. And then super segmental is of course anything that is larger than the segmental. So things like intonation, sound combinations, stress, reduction, elation, blinking, anything beyond the single sound unit. The strategy basically begins with us teaching segmentals, and then we add that into a super segmental environment. So for example, I'll teach P, F, and B individually, and put that into super segmentals. Like for example, when we are talking about stress words, for example, and stress syllables. For example, if we will P, F, and B, then we put it into an environment of perfect, fantastic, and those type of words where you start to consider what stress actually is. After that, then we go into putting it into a real environment. So we may talk about rejoiners, follow-up questions, and how those sounds change and how those sounds are used in different contexts. And this allows for these rules for the sounds to be fostered in an environment where students are aware of the rules, the exceptions, and also helps them to understand the mistakes that they're making, and also helps them to autocorrect. And at the end, of course, it celebrates ownership and language successes.
Okay, so why blended learning? What are the Web 2.0 tools? Web 2.0 refers to web-based technology that facilitates and promotes communication and sharing among users worldwide. We use communication every day. We use these tools, for example, blogs, wikis, RSS feeds, aggregators, social bookmarks, among others. Web 2.0 tools promote a new approach to global interaction that has been rapidly adopted by the learning community. So why do we use Web 2.0 tools? Well, because negotiation and meeting is a must for language learning to take place. And I'm sure that we try to do this in our classroom as much as possible. But this is really only possible through interaction, through real communication. And Web 2.0 tools facilitate this. Well, we'll be talking about 3 different tools here, but these tools can be extended beyond the classroom to interclassroom communications and also to the World Wide Web. The students can communicate with each other, they can get feedback, and they can also get feedback from native speakers. Web 2.0 tools facilitate both processes that align access to varied input and interaction. For example, when they're using webinars, podcasts, videos, vlogs, screencasts, they are given access to spoken language. So how does Web 2.0 tools make students autonomous? Well, for example, a student-centered syllabus containing objectives stated in terms of student performance, meaningful activities designed taking into consideration students' interests, needs, and learning styles, step-by-step lessons, plans, and a clear evaluation system constitute together the first step to promoting autonomy in learning. And this is very difficult to do in a face-to-face approach. When we give students collaborative activities to do in Web 2.0 tools, they're working together, they're working in context, and of course, they're collaborating with each other to ask questions and to go beyond what is in the classroom.
The first thing we're going to look at is what is the behavior effect. And of course, this is part of the manipulation of what students refer to as lip sync. The video, and take a look at the behavior effect. So I'm going to ask you to focus on the gentleman's mouth and to focus on what you hear. Can everyone see the video? Okay, watch the video a couple of times, staring at the man's mouth, and then the next time I'd like you to close your eyes and watch and listen to the video. And you'll notice that what you hear is not what you actually see. And so the point of using lip syncing as part of our activities, is to show students that a lot of communication happens through visual cues. And so in our videos, we use mouth manipulation to emphasize that the position of a student's mouth, the way they articulate, the place of articulation is very important for them to be understood. And also helps us understand them. Now, there are a few videos that I'd like to show you. Of my students' examples. So if you can click onto Jack. Jack is using mouth manipulation in its simplest terms, just using his iPhone to record himself. And ABC is done through a class activity where the entire class participated to create a lip syncing of the song ABC. In your classes, these videos can be as simple or as sophisticated as your students want to make them. And again, the point of it is to watch how Jack's mouth moves, and of course the class, and you notice how there are words that he doesn't know, and there are words that he is certain of, and that affects the way that he actually communicates. And actually, it's also reflected in the way he speaks English. And the next type of activity that we use in classes are voiceovers, and that is dubbing. And what you notice about this is a little bit different from lip syncing. This time around, they've got to match their own voices to what they see on the screen. And in voiceovers, we use two specific programs for this. The first is Screener to actually capture the video, and also use VoiceThread so that students themselves can comment and watch and peer evaluate. And you'll want to discuss more about Screener and VoiceThread.
Screener is a great app to use because there's nothing to install. You use everything from the web-based tool. It's Java-based. It's multi-platform. It works both on Mac and PC, and also in Linux. And it can be played anywhere. It can be used on your phone. It could be used on your tablets because it's just it produces a regular video at the end. It can be embedded on various social networks like Facebook, Google+, Yahoo. It can be used for tutorials. I use it in my class in the first week when students were having problems to logging into various LMS packages like Moodle or signing up to tutorial.com. Sometimes video is much easier to use than text and pictures. And also, So we use voice threads. This is voice. The picture here is the login for voice threads, and the voice thread is very, very easy. Only thing you need to do is log in, make an account, and just click on upload, and you can upload your videos, slides, or documents. And voice threads is special because, if I don't know if you remember this, but do you remember old ABS programs that we used to have long time ago before web browsers were common? Voice threads, if you have a web browser, you could use voice threads. It's free.
If you could pay education licenses if you want to keep the voice threads private, or if you want to have common links or common login systems or analytics, but free account gives you the ability to log in, create videos, have discussions, have presentations. Voice form is basically a BBS with voice and video. So you could give feedback, you could narrate your own presentation. Students can log in and give feedback and talk and interact. And also, I use this in my class for debates. For example, a student can give a reader's presentation, and other students log in and give feedback or ask questions, and the original presenter has to go back and give answers to it. Yeah, it's free.
So here's an example of one of my students practicing this voiceover. And the video comes from Glee, and there is subtitles so that students know what the words are. And their job is to match the singer's mouth with their own words. This can be done through songs, it can be done through newscasts, it can be done through virtually anything that is available online. So if you click on the link on this page, you'll watch Atina singing a song that's found on Glee. We're going to put it onto on the sidebar right now. Sorry about that. There you go. Thanks, Glenn. Okay. So as you watch the video, the purpose of the voiceovers, again, is to focus learners onto stress-based language perception and production, watching how the cadence of language changes depending on which environment that they are participating in. It also encourages students to focus on listening for reduction, elision, deletion of function words. Again, these are all things that can be scaffolded into the way that you teach pronunciation. It could be a little slow. So the video is Poker Face, as sung by the cast of Glee, and it's a slower version, but as you can see, the purpose of this video was to focus on P and F sounds. And of course, focusing within a super segmental of thought groups. And the third type of activities that we do often are learner creations. And for this, I use a program called Go Animate, and this allows me to evaluate students based on everything that we have studied. For example, patterns and questions, the P, F, V, and V sounds, front vowels, and everything that's part of my syllabus. Now, the program that we're going to show you is Go Animate and VoiceThread. The first one is on VoiceThread, and I find VoiceThread very useful because it does allow students to discuss their own creations. The first voice that I'm going to show you is focusing on R and H sounds, and that was done because we have a group of Brazilian students, and they created the tongue twister, they put it online, and each of them had to practice saying it. So if you take a look through this link, you'll see that my 16 or 15 students in the class had to practice it. I did the first one to show them how to say it, and the rest was up to them. This group that you're going to watch, they are our lowest levels, and they are coming at a pre-academic and level 1 of our 7 level program. Can everyone see the voice thread? Once you sign in and register into the voice thread, then you can comment all you want. Without registering into the voice thread, all you can do is watch the video.
Okay, the next tool that we're going to talk about is called Go Animate. Well, Go Animate is a scripting and storyboarding app. Everything is done online. Students have the complete freedom to choose their backgrounds, moves, characters, and add props. And even their avatars, their representation of themselves can be completely customized, to make it look like them, change the skin color, change glasses, mustaches, hair color. With Go Animate, there are 5 different steps. First, I usually get the students to go through scripting and storyboarding in class, where they brainstorm with a partner or group of students to come up with a storyline and storyboarding. Then, second step is to do the voice recording. It is individualized, and the students can do it at their own pace, and they can record it many times to make sure that their pronunciation is accurate. And next, they could add their visual elements. This is the most fun and exciting part of Go Animate, because they could animate the pictures, they could choose different themes. The themes are already there. You don't have to use the themes. You could use your individual elements, but the themes are there for ease and convenience sake. Then later, we go through what I usually do a lesson of metaphors. So that leads into adding background music and emotion. It gives the video contextualization. And finally, students can publish it. And Go Animate, the end result is a video that you can embed to your own website or embed it to different social media.
And the video that I'm sending across right now is at the end of our semester, and this is their last project. So this is an accumulation of everything that we have taught. You can hear the different types of question patterns. You'll hear the front vowels. You'll hear the labial sounds, the bilabial sounds, the labial dental sounds. You'll hear R and L. It's all put together. The students have created their own dialogues. They've practiced these things, and then they've created their own animation. What I like best about Go Animate is that it's as simple or as complicated as you want it to be. At its very easiest terms, everything is set up for you, the backgrounds are set up, and all you actually have to do is record your dialogue there and then press preview. And the computer does everything else. It animates it, they discuss it, and it's great. This is also very interesting because what I used to do was just dialogues in class that the students would present. Nowadays, with Go Animate, it's much more fun. They can create their own scenarios, they can go and use their imagination, and it's still using the old dialogue system, but in a much more fun and exciting way. And at the end of the day, it's so much easier for me to evaluate once I see these videos, they're exciting, and I can actually mark on all the things that I'm looking for. And the students love it. So not only do they actually do their assignments, they actually take this home and use it with their kids, and they make their own little fun dialogue that they post to each other also. If you want to take one step further, you can also put this onto a voice thread type thing and have everyone discuss it. So, what I like about using all these programs with my pronunciation now is that it makes pronunciation a lot more fun in class. It allows students to understand what is going on and how things are put together, not just on a sound basis, but also you see it in a real-world context. And they focus on communication skills in my class, so it's not just pronunciation, but it's pronunciation with speaking, and then finally, of course, within communication. And this can happen at any level, whether they are beginner students, whether they're intermediate students, or whether they're advanced students. The biggest difference that I find between the three different groups is just their vocabulary and their grammar. Scaffolding the skills for pronunciation is really important because a lot of times I find that in classrooms we end up giving a holistic mark on a student's pronunciation and not really telling them why or how they're losing their marks, or why they've gone to B instead of an A, or what's wrong with their pronunciation and how to fix it. So when you scaffold sounds and when you scaffold all of these elements together, it makes it a lot more accountable, a lot more transparent for students. And what I also like is that when you build upon these things, it's not just like in some textbooks, you get the one sound and then you get a super segmental, and then that's it. And then you go on to the next unit, and then the first unit isn't seen again. But when you start scaffolding it, putting all the lessons together, building from one lesson to the next, it's really important that students understand that at every cycle, what you're doing is adding a new element. So when you go from P, F, B, and B to stress words, or sorry, stress syllables, then the next element would probably be adding another sound, maybe front vowels, and then you go add probably stress in sentences, and everything is accumulated in the whole program. Depending on what level you're starting at, so when I do beginner students, it's very important that I do focus on sounds, letter sounds, vowel sounds, and of course, telling them and showing them that English is a stress time language and not a syllable time language. And all that means is that the way that we speak focuses on our stress points. And throughout the entire semester or session, that's what we start. That's what we start teaching. And hopefully, that when they start learning these things, you actually see a big difference. And what I've just started most recently is I actually started going to roamchang.com and having students record a first reading for me. And at the end of the semester, then I have a final reading from them. And we sit down in a small little short interview just to show them how much they've improved. And that really promotes ownership for them. And once they see the difference, once they hear the difference, they're astounded at how much has changed. So, are there any questions that you'd like to ask?
If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat box, or just type the word question in there, and we'll go in turn, and you can unmute yourselves and ask a question. But that's, I mean, those are some amazing activities in there. Really useful stuff. The very first one you showed with I forget the name of it, but the man speaking was similar to what Luella was talking about when she talks to people and then turns her back and gets them to talk. The same thing as closing your eyes and listening to it. You really hear something differently. We have a question from Christina. How much of a learning curve do your students typically have for technology? Maybe you can talk about the different levels of technology you guys have encountered with your students.
I think many of these students, sorry, I think many of the students already know how to use many of these tools. If they know how to log into Facebook, they should be able to log into any of these. I think the biggest problem the students have is, they don't like to have their speaking and pronunciation on, on a website where everybody can hear it. But you could always make those things private. And I have a bully video that there is on VoiceThread. I think it's a grade 7-year-old giving a presentation of anti-bullying campaign, and that motivates the students to be able to be more open-minded about uploading videos. Like, for example, Asian students, they're already they're so used to sharing everything, in an online context. But you're right. It all depends on students, students' background. Some students, some low-level students, or depending on their culture, they can't even type. So, it has to. You can't just push these tools to students without understanding the students' needs and students' backgrounds.
Yeah, that's true. It may be a cultural thing, or as somebody was talking about earlier, the difference between adult students or younger students who are growing up with this technology. I know older students, and not as many of them will be familiar with it. Next question. When do you assign the animate assignments? Are students given class time to record the dialogue, or do they do it on their own time? What's the process like? Do you help them with that in their class and leave them on their own, or do they do this in class? Maybe you guys can talk about the process of the Go Animate assignments.
That depends on the level of the students. So right now I am teaching the very lowest level at York University, which is pre-AP and level 1. And for that class, it's all done in class. So when they write their dialogues to me showing them how to go animate, and we do this together. I use the computer lab that we have, and we all sit down and we all log in, and I show them how to do all of that step by step. It is very much watched over. At the higher levels, I don't do any of that. They handle their dialogues on their own. They log in on their own, and they upload on their own. So it depends on how comfortable your students are with the technology. If they're not comfortable with technology, then it's very teacher focused. I do spend a lot of time helping students figuring out how to use a computer, because I'm not very computer savvy. So as they're figuring it out, I'm helping them figure it out, and it works that way. But for my higher students, especially those from certain areas that are much more technologically advanced, they have no problems figuring this stuff out. The only problems I have sometimes is because of the vocabulary. Sometimes they don't understand what login is, or what register is, or something, or username, and they're not familiar with those terms. Then, of course, that requires pre-teaching. That's what I do with the lower levels also.
Great, thanks. Next question. Claudie brings up a really interesting point about evaluating pronunciation. What do you do about accents? So personal. When students come into class, do they expect to be taught on computers? Is the course advertised as blending? So it's kind of an instructional design mixed with theory question. How do you deal with those aspects of the course itself?
In my class, I try to emphasize that there is no standard pronunciation, that there are all different Englishes around the world. And we look at the how pronunciation can hinder communicative effect. But as long as it doesn't hinder those communicative effect, then it's fine. And for example, voice threads, it's not just the students that can, students can go and give feedback. It's also native speakers. And when they see native speakers can understand what they're saying when they're giving presentation, it actually empowers the students. In my course, I teach a four-skilled course, so pronunciation itself isn't advertised as blended learning, but I find in a four-skills course, there's so much to do, but moving some of this away out of the class time as a blended learning actually makes it easier and gives students more chance to use pronunciation. Danny?
The other thing that we used to do was we still do, and it's called call. And I don't advertise my courses as using call, but I do include the call. So the next step after that was actually just into this blended environment and incorporating computers in the classroom and as part of class time. I think that students nowadays, they kind of expect it. And as far as accents go, it can be different from different parts of Canada, but here in Toronto, the standard is rarely heard and rarely used. So I don't really focus on accent reduction or accent modification here. I do focus on comprehensibility, and I focus on articulation, which is why those first few videos and those first few assignments are integral inside of my classrooms, is that they need to understand that their mouths have to move, their mouths have to mimic the way that we would speak as native speakers. And once they see that, they understand that they really have to really focus on the sounds. For many of our students, the sounds are very similar to English, not exactly the same. So they need tweaking on how their mouths move, and their points of articulation, where it happens in the mouth, how the sound travels, and I think that's the big focus in my classes.
That's interesting. That's a great answer. And you can see the difference between what you guys are talking about and maybe a little bit different from what Luella was talking about in terms of accent modification. You're talking more about the comprehensibility, and there is no standard of that. Like, we did have a question up there about textbooks. What textbooks do you use, if any, and do you use oral drills to correct pronunciation, or maybe students are having quite a bit of difficulty or problems?
Here, I'll type up the list of textbooks that we use on the chat window.
Okay, great. What about oral drills? Do you do anything like drilling or something like that?
Yes, and actually, with the lower levels, I really do practice over and over and over again with them, especially when it comes to sounds that they don't have or that are different from what we have here. For example, with my Brazilian students right now, the last week was on R and H, and of course showing them how the letters are different here that create those sounds are different here in English. And so we go through a lot of vocabulary in the board until they get it. So on the voice thread that you saw, those were all student-created sentences, and they had vocabulary lists in front of them, and they had to create sentences. And of course, I helped them through those sentences to make sure that they were correct, grammatically correct, and then before we put them onto voice thread. And so once they recognize that there are certain sounds, certain letters that create certain sounds, and they may be different from their own language, I think that was a big step of understanding that things are similar, just different.
Right, good. A couple of more questions or comments. Barbara says she disagrees about the standard accent in Toronto. Maybe that's just a matter of how wide we want to define a standard or not, but feel free to comment on that. And then after that, we have a question about motivation. If you have any tips for motivating students, I know a lot of these activities are motivating in themselves, the Go Animate for sure, but do you have any other tips for motivation for students to keep practicing outside the classroom?
Practice outside of the classroom here in Toronto is really depending on your language group that you're part of, and whether or not you want to stay within your own language group, or whether you want to hang out with other people. As far as the standard goes, well, a lot of our teachers here, Canadian born or Canadian raised, yes, we have this accent, but when you talk about adults and their environments, that's very different. I teach mostly adults, so that's what I focus on. I focus on, for my adult classes that I have at York, I encourage them to understand the cultural differences, not just the language differences, but the cultural differences. And a lot of times for them to integrate better into the workplace is not a matter of speaking better, it's a matter of integrating culturally better. And I don't teach kids, so I'm not really sure about that environment. But as far as the standard goes, I encourage students not to aim for the standard because that leads into an entire area that I'm not ready to go into.
Yeah, that's a good point. It depends on where your target audience or your target student is. Students are different than adults as well. Just checking.
And that's right. There's one more thing about motivation, and there's things that I also do incorporate into my class. I just started this with one of my other instructors at Ryerson. And we try to make things a bit more tactile. So when it comes to sound discrimination, instead of just, for example, the old style was just write down what you hear. We actually do things like clapping when they hear a sound, or putting up their arms. We started doing like the hokey pokey type of thing for when they hear certain sounds. It sounds a little crazy, but it gets students moving, and they enjoy it. The more that they can do in class and make pronunciation more interesting, the more they enjoy it. And outside of class, when we're talking about yes, and Barbara, I totally agree that students feel that the standard is very important. But in the workplace, as you know, the standard is only one dialect inside a workplace. And here in Toronto, we're a lot more accommodating, I feel, when it comes to dialect use. Again, for adults to reduce their accents, their perceived accents, yes, they can, but again, there's a lot of things that go around that. And if that is their goal, then great, but I can't force that upon all of my students because that's really, really difficult to achieve for many students. Depending on where they come from, their educational background, there's a lot more to deal with than just changing your accent and perception of sound. I'd rather them be confident in the way that they speak, and for them to speak inside their own environments and situations, and be understood and be comprehensible.
Yeah, those are all good points, and I think on both sides. I mean, one of the reasons we're doing a webinar on pronunciation is because it's one of the most requested topics that we do get, and it's a whole nother topic when you talk about what people want and kind of educating on them on what they should want, or is that even a teacher's right to say something like that? I think probably a lot of language teachers have run into that problem, and that's quite a different issue, but very interesting nonetheless. Do we have any other questions in the chat box? Yes, Marilyn, that was amazing. That was a lot of great activities in there, guys. Thank you very much. If there's no more questions, maybe we'll start to wrap it up. Later next week, we'll take all of these links that Luella, Danny, and Johan has provided for us. We'll put it in the Manitoba EAL group in Tutela. I have a forum thread up there already. We'll add the link to the recording there, all of these links to these wonderful activities, and we'll put a summary up there as well. And please take any of these questions down there into the group, and let's talk about it there, because this is some really interesting stuff, especially in the chat, what people are talking about. It's really great. it helped a lot, and I think what you and Danny are doing is you're going to see more and more people getting into these things and start using these Web 2.0 tools in very creative and wonderful ways.
Thank you.
No, Johan, that's for me to say sorry. Sorry about all the tech problems, everybody. You guys did great with it.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you, everyone, for attending. Just another reminder that if you do need a certificate, please email me within the next hour, and we'll get that out to you next week at some point. There's my email there on the screen. And you'll see another reminder for our upcoming conference in January of 2014. The call from presentations is open, so if you do develop any wonderful technology activities in the style of Danny or Johan, please submit a presentation and let everybody know about it the same way that they let you know about it. It would be great and wonderful to share with everybody. Sure, I'll post the PDF as well of the presentation into the Manitoba EAL group forum thread, which I'll post a link to that as well. Oh, thank you, Natalia. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Sorry again about the technical difficulties, but the chat was great. There was a lot of good discussion, good points. I'm glad to see people talking about the different ideas that were going on.